Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. Today, we are speaking with Katie McLaughlin. Katie is the founder, chief strategist, and transformation artist of McLaughlin Method. She helps companies by creating healthier, happier workplaces through intensive team workshops to uncover the conflicts that prevent teams from working together. I absolutely love that because I've seen my share of conflicts. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And I've obviously seen my share of conflicts as well. And that's why I do what I do.
Absolutely. Now, folks, we will be speaking about team dynamics unlocked, building stronger organizations. And I know for those that are business owners, organization leaders, this is the episode for you to get some of these tips. But before we get into that conversation, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, so I spent the majority of my career in startups and tech, usually kind of mature startups, more than 100 employees, and on the people side of business. So that was learning and development, talent. But I found that the best work I could do to prepare people to really access and unleash their potential on the job was to get in the trenches of business and help improve processes. That's kind of one of my other jams. Everywhere I go, people are like, "Wow, this process document is great." um, and I've also spent a good portion of my career in change management as well, helping companies to see through these big changes, whether that's an acquisition or a software implementation, and get themselves to realize the actual like results and return on the investment that they're making. And all of that is through people. And so I started my business in 2020 to really hyper focus on people holistically. So it's not just about are they getting the right benefits? It's not just about are they getting the right training, but it's about that day to day experience that is culture. Culture's not this big thing where it's, this happy hour and this event and um, the time off policy. It is that day to day how we're treated. And the better we're treated day to day, the more we can give of ourselves, we can bring our creative ideas, and we can, show up in healthy conflict, healthy opposing viewpoints. All of that is really the fruit of this. And that's really what hinders a lot of companies from seeing the potential business success that they could. So, yeah, I'm excited to chat more about what that's all about.
Yeah, that's absolutely wonderful to hear. Now, we all know that in conflict resolution or anything that really an organization can do, it has to really have a good plan, some goals set in motion, and expectation management, right? So that all of that can flow smoothly. So, how do you approach defining clear goals and objectives when building teams in organizations? And why is this step essential for team success?
Well, most companies have actually already set some goals, and that is their company values. And so often that's just, a thing that goes on the wall or a page on your website. But the values, the reason why companies go through that process of creating values is that speaks to how they want everyone to feel and engage at work with customers, partners. And but if they're just on a wall, we don't know how to enact on those. So many companies, especially when I think about the startup world where I live and thrive, transparency is one of the top company values that is put out there as this goal, as this thing to strive for. But transparency requires a certain level of vulnerability, of safety, of bravery in order to be transparent and call out, say, a opposing viewpoint and not just opt into the group think and being a yes person. And so when we don't know how to cultivate our values within the ways that we're engaging as a team, we're never actually going to get there. We're going to just keep hitting roadblocks. And those roadblocks cost time and cost money. Time is money, right? If a for example, a particular decision or project takes, say, 10 meetings, an hour long, you can calculate out who's in those meetings, how much of their salary are they spending in on that project, and it's largely going to be outsized because of conflict, of people dragging their feet, of not prioritizing the work. And what if that same effort could be done in 90 minutes of meetings? That would be a huge cost savings, and people would feel more engaged and more empowered to do the work because it didn't take them that long to really get to a consensus and get to on the same page. So there's really this rich people impact, of course, but that equals money, it equals profits, it equals efficiency and productivity.
Yeah, great points there. Now, a lot of these challenges, let's say, that happen within the corporate structure or an organizational structure typically lends to some misunderstandings of strengths, weaknesses, how do you pair folks, how people work together, who is supportive of one effort or the other. So, in your opinion, how do you go about identifying the unique strength and weaknesses of team members? And then, how does this understanding contribute to building effective teams?
That is a great question, and it's complex. It's layered. I think the big thing I want to emphasize at this moment is that there are no quick fixes to creating great teams, and there are no quick fixes to conflict. So there's not this concrete playbook. Yes, there are guardrails and guidelines and best practices, but that's not say this, then do this, then say this. So that's the first thing I just want to kind of put out there. But so essentially, how do we identify kind of what are those unique strengths of our team? Right. That was the first part of your question. And there are a lot of things that we know, but we don't really take a time to reflect on. The average leader is overbooked, overworked, has too many people potentially even reporting to them, and is actually doing more of the work of the team or of their team than actually leading. And it takes first setting aside time and lay out all your people, whether you're a physical tangible note taker, or you're someone who uses like a Kanban type board, or a Trello type board. This is what I used to have when I led people. I had kind of a card and a stack for every single person on my team, and break down what do you know about them as their strengths, what do you observe as their weaknesses, and have your team members do the same thing, because you're going to bring into your perception of their strengths and weaknesses your own biases and assumptions. Now, biases are not just identity related or, race related, age related. It's not just about that, but our perspective and our assumptions on X behavior is appropriate or inappropriate in the workplace. This is professional, not professional, or this person is working hard, not working hard. Those are other layers of bias and assumptions that we need to be facing as leaders in the workplace. And so by getting perspectives from the people themselves around their strengths and their weaknesses, you can start to build a fuller picture. And you can do this across your whole team, have other people give that input. Now, is this sounding a little bit like a performance review? A little bit, right? We already do some of this activity, but it doesn't have to be that formal. It can be bullet points. And it's also a way for everybody to get, again, I think about transparency here, right? I was describing that as a possible value that gives us a chance for everybody to be a little bit more transparent, and it gives us as leaders a chance to stretch our perspective. Now, there's other ways that when I work with clients, and leaders can also, be doing this or accomplishing this on their own, is to leverage personality tests. Now, I'll give a caveat: they are not the be all and end all. They are not the definitive answer on, who this person is and how they act. If you've ever taken a personality test, you know that it's not all accurate, right? But that can provide another layer of input. And when I work with clients, I take all of that data and then I bring us into a room, whether that's virtual or in person, and we do a workshop. Now, if you're watching us on video, you'll notice that above my shoulder here, I have some theater masks. And my background before getting into startups and kind of corporate world was in theater. And I still do theater and improv today as well. But what I found was that theater and a specific body of techniques called image theater are an extremely effective way of getting people to play, be themselves, and also to start to reveal some of those conflicts, some of those perspectives that are harder to define or describe because words just aren't good enough. So, those are some of the ways that I start to unpack this so that way we can move forward and be, thinking about, okay, what are we needing as a team and where can we best use our team members to accomplish different tasks, projects, initiatives, etc.
Yeah, and a lot of the excavation that a leader can actually go into to trying to find all this information really boils down into their ability to communicate. And so communication is often cited as the key factor in successful team dynamics. So how could you share some strategies or best practices for fostering effective communication within teams, especially in this diverse and remote work environment?
Yeah, especially with the transition from the pandemic to everyone, just about everybody having an experience of working remotely and leading remotely. um, I have a feeling more people realized that their communication skills were lacking. And the reason for that is that, first of all, in person we rely so heavily on other other cues to communicate. So it's not just about the words that you say. It's also not just about the tone, but it's also your facial expressions, your body language. All of that comes into the actual thing we're expressing and the actual thing we're communicating. And it's about the way that that is received. I often encourage leaders to be thinking about not just the intention behind what they say something, behind what they're saying, but the impact of what they're saying. And the impact is on the other side. It is not something that you can necessarily control because they're a unique human being too. And so the way that we're communicating is a two-way street. We need to understand, well, okay, I'm saying maybe I have to give some bad news to a team member that really they kind of missed a deadline, they missed something, and I'm at the place of kind of questioning their performance. I have to have that feedback conversation with them. And so, but my intention is good, right? My intention is that I want them to know that this is important and that I'm here for them and want to help them like change that and make a difference here. So my intention is good. Maybe I have even the best possible delivery that is empathetic and kind and open and calm. But the impact of that can still be outsized. It can still be like really kind of conflict creating, right? It can be triggering for the person on the other side. And that is because of all of their past experiences, getting feedback, working with leaders. It's based on their self image and self perspective. Because so many of us, we expect that in the workplace we're going to be able to like leave behind all of those things, that this is just about work, that it is also just about the work that we do and not about the identities that we have and the color of our skin, the age, experience level, etc., that it's about the work that we do. But it's ultimately there's all these other layers and clouds. And so we can't just think about communication as what am I saying? And we can't just think about it as like, when am I saying it or how am I saying it? All of those things are so important to work on. And we need to think about the other side of that conversation, what they need, how they react, and being able to dig a little deeper, create some of that brave space for folks to be able to communicate back to us of, well, what's really going on? I'm surprised by your reaction. Can you tell me a little bit more about what's happening? Um, the other tip that I'll just add is, especially when you have to give negative or constructive feedback for someone else, be thinking about the location, the timing of when you have that conversation. And it's less about making you comfortable, but also about how can you make that other person comfortable to hopefully try to reduce some of those triggers and increase their sense of openness and willingness to kind of hear you out.
Team dynamics is a complex thing. Just as just mentioning, just in alone with communication, there's so many variables you need to consider as a leader when you're trying to do that. And most leaders don't take the time to even think about all that.
Mhm.
So great points on that regard. And as a complex environment where some organizations don't really establish a way of their workers or their teams to make these decisions that go on, and I know there was a lot of times that I was frustrated because I could not make a solid decision based on bureaucracy or, or an autocratic type of leadership that was established. So establishing a structured decision making process is crucial
Mm.
for team efficiency. So, what are some common approaches to decision making within teams? And then, how can organizations determine the most suitable method for their specific context?
So, the first thing that I recommend when thinking about decision making is, first of all, having that self awareness that I kind of started to allude to, of what am I bringing into kind of the conversation or the decisions, and also the people that are involved in those decisions, what are they bringing into that conversation? And then start to evaluate, well, okay, first of all, what are our goals of this decision? Is it a business goal? Is it a financial goal? Is it a sales goal? Whatever that goal is of that decision. And is it aligned with our values? So is that overall decision or those goals aligned with our values as an organization? And then we get to the actual decision-making process. How do we evaluate what all our options are? How do we get a diverse and equitable amount of options? And that's where getting your team involved, and not just the leadership team, but getting the people who are actually impacted by and need to carry out and change based on those decisions, get them involved in the conversations. Now, getting people involved in conversations will take time, but the more practiced you get at creating environments where people can share openly, can bring their ideas, the faster this kind of process will go. So you can survey folks, make sure it's anonymous, be considerate of the fact that if somebody has a contrary opinion, it needs to be a safe place where they don't worry about, is there going to be retribution for me calling out a roadblock or saying the thing that people don't want said? So if you are a person who is working with a remote team, in your video calls, maybe you want to use chat to gain feedback, have everyone rename themselves to the same word. Maybe that's honesty or team or something else. And then ask the question, then get the feedback, because you won't have the comments attributed to the individual. And it's not really about who contributed the idea, right? It's about, what are the ideas? What are the things we're not thinking about and not seeing as part of this decision? What are those impacts, right? And another great way that I encourage and work with companies when they're facing decisions and maybe really struggling to get people all engaged or on board with a decision is, I bring in those theater exercises. I bring in improv, and we use some techniques from improv called yes and. So what if we just continued to yes and different ideas? and build upon them. That and is building upon them. So we can really just explore the full possibility of innovation, creativity, no wrong answers, just crazy ideas. Because sometimes it's that crazy idea that's really going to disrupt the market or make the biggest impact towards getting us to those goals that this decision is trying to achieve overall. And the last thing that's part of a decision is implementing it. And this is, I think, where nearly every company falls down. Implementing a decision is about getting people to get on board that train and head on out in whatever direction you have outlined. Well, why would I get on this train? What's in it for me? How hard is it for me to get on this train? Is it already moving? Are there, big steps that I have to take to get on this train? Do I have to find where the train station is? Uh, when decisions get made and we are not prepared for how to, get on the bus, get on the train, enact or behave in the workplace associated with that decision, we're left in a place of resistance. We don't want to change. Change is hard. As part of our neurobiology and our psychology, uh, comfort is safe, right? Comfort is easy. Our brains want to make things easy. So the act of changing how we do something, we have to, as leaders, implement decisions using a very hands-on, very detailed change management process, through communication, training, coaching, ongoing support, and thinking about what are the ways people are going to be impacted and react to these scenarios, and start to get ahead of that in how we're communicating with folks and how we engage them.
Absolutely love how you bring in theater into your practice and your exploration of building teams. But similar to the two masks, if you are viewing this, you have contradicting facial expression, right? You're going to have conflict. We mentioned that early on. Conflict is something that you can almost guarantee will show up in any given time because we're just so dynamic personally. We bring in whatever happened at home that may be sidetracking us for one reason or another. So conflict is inevitable in any
Yeah.
team setting. So how do you recommend addressing conflicts constructively within the teams? And what role does effective conflict resolution play in maintaining team cohesion and productivity?
Overall, when we think about conflict, conflict is kind of one of those, it's not 4 letters, but it's essentially a 4-letter word, right? Where as soon as we hear people talk about conflict, we're like, "Oh god, I'm gonna run away," you know? And, some people, when they think about conflict, their reaction is, "I'm gonna gear up and I'm gonna fight it out." And, if you're watching, you saw me do some physical poses, like that fighting might be me putting my hands up and scowling, right? Or that running away could literally be moving away from the camera, putting my hands up, not wanting to face it. And so, as leaders, we need to get out of the mindset that we need to be happy and agree all the time. That is not productive. It is false. It doesn't exist, right? Um, but if we can embrace the fact that conflict by itself doesn't have to be a bad thing. Conflict can just be opposing viewpoints or diverse perspectives. And we know there are studies on this that diverse teams are more productive, they bring in higher profits, and that diversity forces us to question our assumptions. It forces us to be really clear about what are the facts that are attributing or contributing to our opinions, etc. And it forces us to be open to hearing somebody else's opinion. As leaders, we often feel like we have to be right and that we have to be the ones that know things. And productive conflict can start by a leader expressing that I don't know the answer to this question. And I'm going to do what I can to find it out. Or this is about us as a collective, as a team, coming to an answer. We're going to go through some process of, I often say there's no dumb ideas and there's no right or wrong. And so, what happens if we just throw it all out there, good, bad, indifferent, etc., and really just see what is kind of the scope of how we could be looking at this. Now, a lot of teams need intensive intervention to get to that place. I coach leaders one on one around how to understand what is my perspective, what's the stuff that I'm bringing in, or how am I seeing people in maybe a limiting way, and how can I cultivate that openness in myself. But as a team, when we all come together as a team, everyone is responding to the same prompts to create an image of their perspectives, their feelings on how we solve a particular problem. And it's really beautiful because without having to say the right words, without being singled out, we're gaining huge perspectives across the group, and we're able to start to see, where do these resonate with each other, where is there a resemblance, and when we start to recognize that we actually have seen these emotions or feelings before, we can start to see, oh, maybe we're not so different. Yes, completely unique. Every person is very unique, but maybe our perceived differences are not a detriment. They're actually closer than we think they are. And so if we gather and go into things with that assumption that we are closer than we think we are, that conflict doesn't have the same charge. We're also, we've created that sense of openness. So now let's have a conversation about what it might take for us to get to our kind of dream state as a team past this conflict. And it can really be way more productive when we kind of go through some of these exercises and learn to think about conflict in a different way.
Absolutely. Now I'm wearing my people over everything, which is an outlier project t-shirt. And but this people part, this people part is very diverse, very dynamic, very fluid. Sometimes you'll see one person 1 minute, they're the another person the next minute, right? So leaders, you need to be ready for that. You need to be ready to explore different ways of allowing people to be over everything, and also not lose, because we're talking about organizations here. We comprise organizations. Organization is usually a business, and so we have to be uh, at least mindful that there is going to be a need for different approaches and different techniques and different explorations of what would bring this team together. So it's incumbent on the leader also, not not only to drive some of this dynamics, but also be aware that you could be bringing. You said, hey, sometimes we bring our own biases in,
Mhm.
and then tend to be the spoke in the wheel.
Yes. Well, and I also just want to call out, I made a mention before about how you might come into something with the best intention, the best delivery, and it still has this huge triggering impact. Now, the thing that's underlying that, that is present in every leader employee relationship, is a hierarchy. There are power dynamics at play that are always there. And so, as leaders, we have to always be conscious of that, because that, what is that power dynamic? Whether there's a flat organization or not, there is still somebody who is responsible for determining whether or not this person gets opportunities. That you are, as a leader, you are responsible for doling out bonuses and deciding when someone is ready for a promotion. And all of that is very high stakes for your employees. They think about, well, if I to get denied this promotion, am I even appreciated here? I can't leave my job because my family needs the income. Can I find another job? I'm not sure I have the physical, emotional bandwidth right now to actually go through a job hunt. And so if our employees perceive a threat from our leaders about our job, that's our livelihoods. And our bodies and our brains react with all of the chemicals that we would experience if we were in a tiger fight. So we can't lose sight of that as leaders, that that dynamic is always there regardless of everything else. And so we have to do way more work than our employees on a repeated basis. Repetition is your friend. Keep putting out there those messages, that sense of openness, reiterate how important you feel their opinions are, and reiterate the fact that you're not perfect either, that you're a work in progress, and that you want to also learn from them and understand how can you lead them the best.
Yeah, I absolutely love that last point because it is true, folks. You can't think yourself too highly because at the end of the day, we're all trying to make it. Right? We may have different tools and maybe have different accolades or experiences, but we're all trying to make it. So it has been wonderful to have you discuss this topic with us. And I know that you have things coming up. So, what do you have coming up? And how can the listener or the viewer get a hold of you?
Great. This has been a fabulous conversation, and thank you all for listening to the whole conversation. So, one of the best ways to reach me is at my website, McLaughlinMethod.com. I'm also active on LinkedIn. So, please feel free to send me a connection request. Let me know that you listen to this podcast. And coming up, I have openings for one on one coaching with executives or senior leaders to look at those assumptions, gain a better sense of self awareness so that you can make the impact on your team to drive performance, drive productivity, and bolster your own career through that process. And if your team sounds anything like what we've talked about today, reach out, because whether it's a single workshop or best case, a series of engagements together, we can make a really big difference that can completely turn around the way that your team interacts and the impact that they make in your organization.
Absolutely wonderful. Now, Katie, I'm going to make sure to have all that as part of the video and show notes so that the listener and viewer can get a hold of you and if they want to engage you in some business transaction, right? This is the business, folks. But
Yep.
thank you all for listening or viewing. Just want to remind everybody that today's episode is sponsored by Fantail Services and Superpass, which are powering our website and app, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, The Outlier Project, and Duco. If you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to subscribe and let us know by leaving a comment. And we're always looking for new ideas and guests that we can add to the show. So if you know someone or have a topic that you would like featured or covered on the podcast or want to sponsor our show, we love to hear about it by emailing us at triadleadershipsolutions@gmail.com. And this podcast is brought to you by StreamYard, a browser-based tool that lets you live stream to any platform and record podcasts in studio quality and even host webinars. It's built for creators and video marketers to make your job way easier, and we use it to record this podcast. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.